This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Storytellers Cafe. I'm your host Usha Venkatraman. Storytellers Cafe is the number one storytelling podcast show on Bharat FM, a Cincinnati-based radio station that was set up just at the beginning of the pandemic, and we've completed 2 years on Bharat TV and Bharat FM. Thank you for making this commitment every week to listen, learn, and enjoy. Thank you for choosing to listen to Storytellers Cafe. This March, Storytellers Cafe is proud to showcase storytellers, achievers, women storytellers who are amazing, talented, professional. And as you know, friends, India is not lacking in women storytellers. So this March, Storytellers Cafe has curated a special show on the International Women's Day, Break the Bias. That's the theme this year. And as you know, Storytellers Cafe has already made footprints right from down under Australia, Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, India, Doha, Qatar, United Kingdom, and east and west coast of United States, and we are moving on to Canada next month. So welcome to Storytellers Cafe, and today's guest needs no introduction. She has been an inspiration in the storytelling scene in India in the last couple of years. I have personally seen her grow, mature, and evolve. I'm very happy to present my guest tonight, Rohini Vij. Rohini Vij is from Kanpur, and she is an early years educator, professional storyteller, listed Jolly Phonics UK trainer, curriculum developer, drama coach, voice artist, author, and founder of NutSpace Edtech Private Limited. Rohini has widely trained teachers in incorporating the art of storytelling in the classroom and teaching children how to read by way of phonics. She has gained global recognition as a storyteller by performing on various international platforms. She has also developed curriculum for schools across the country and overseas and has worked with various state governments and educational boards to train teachers and develop a story based curriculum. Rohini's diverse experience in the fields of marketing, corporate communication, publishing, public relations, films, radio, theatre, and education gives her a natural flair for applying the art of storytelling in education. NutSpace, her organization, her company, builds life skills and the 21st century skills in children using stories for kids. Rohini says that they deliver their lesson plans via live classes, online classes, and self paced courses. You can follow Rohini Vij on her Instagram at rohini.vij, Vij as in Vij, and also at NutSpace Stories. On YouTube, she has a channel, NutSpace In. On Facebook, you can follow her on NutSpace, and on LinkedIn, Rohini Vij. So, Storytellers Cafe is proud to present our guest tonight, Rohini Vij. Hi, Rohini. Welcome to Storytellers Cafe.
Thank you so much, Usha. Well, thank you so much for having me here, and namaste to everybody who's listening to us and watching us.
Yes, Rohini, how are you? How is Kanpur? How is the weather right now?
Kanpur is getting good. Spring is here. So the winter, it's a farewell to the winter, and summer months are here. It's going to be getting very, very hot soon. So we're enjoying this little window of spring. It's lovely at the moment.
Lovely. And Holi is around the corner, right?
Yes.
Just about in a week, 10 days' time.
Yes.
Rohini, as you know, today's episode or this month is a special on Women's Day, where we are exploring the theme of break the bias. That's the theme for this year. And women storytellers, of course, can tell stories, but I know you're one of the women who has risen to this challenge. So we would like to listen to your story. What's your story?
Thank you so much, Visha. I'm going to try to make it brief because it's a long story, and as you know how it is with us storytellers once we get started. But I grew up in the hills of Shimla, and that's where my introduction to stories really got started. I was raised on an active dose of stories by my parents, my grandparents, and I had, a special interest in performing always. So while in school, I was always found on the stage, whether it was plays, whether it was extempore, elocution. I was always there on the stage. I loved the limelight, and so I grew up there. I completed my graduation and did really well. I think Shimla gave me a lot of platforms to perform. And also, when I was in St. Bede's, that's where I completed my graduation from, I got the opportunity to stand for an election. And I was the admiral of the college in the centenary year, which is the head girl of the college. So that gave me, immense empowerment and sense of achievement, accomplishment. It was really wonderful, my growing up years. I was very fortunate to have grown up in the hills. And then I moved to Delhi for my post graduation. I studied, in the line of media, and joined the publishing industry, the PR industry before I got into publishing, and worked in the corporate sector for a few years. I switched over to publishing, worked there for a couple of years, children's publishing. And that's where I got introduced to books, especially children's books, and authors, and putting up events. And that really sort of attracted me. I loved that part of my life, meeting people, meeting authors, putting together events, being a part of literary fests. It was a wonderful, wonderful part of my career. And in the middle also, I used to do radio and voiceovers for some films, and whatever little gigs I would get, I would take it up. So that is something that kept going. I did a little bit of theater also while I was living in Delhi. And yes, I think constantly I was in touch with my creative side. But it's only when I became a mom, and at that point I was working with a corporate house, and I was handling corporate communication for them. And I thought that I'm going to get back to it maybe after a couple of years, once my boy is a little old enough to sort of be independent, I'll get back to it. So for just a few years, my husband, who's a filmmaker, and we both decided that, okay, let's take a break from the metropolitan city, and let's move to Kanpur, which is basically my husband's hometown, and we'll be there. We were sort of seeking family support at that moment with our little one. And once we are done, maybe 2 or 3 years max, we'll be back in Delhi, back to our respective careers. Little did we know that life was about to change for us, because when we came here, initially it was settling down period, and I was very busy because I was a new mom, learning new things, making new mistakes every day. The only solace I got at that point was by reading to my son, or by telling him stories, by performing for him. And that's where I realized that I really missed being on stage, really missed performing. So he was this audience, and I would perform for him, and I was always getting a ready applause from this little audience right there. And when it was time to start stepping out with him, I realized that there aren't any avenues. I mean, where do you take your child out in Kanpur? Take him to a mall. And I'm like, no. And maybe a bookstore, but where is a bookstore? There were those little traditional bookstores that had mostly textbooks, not storybooks. And I saw this huge gap over here. And I spoke to my fellow moms, a few I knew at that point, what do you do? And nobody really had an answer. And that's when I decided that I'm going to maybe, try something, maybe do something for kids. And I started with this small thought of telling stories to children. And we invited, say, 5 or 7 moms to our house in the basement of our house. And I did a storytelling session. And I said, I want to do this regularly as a class. Out of those 7, about 4 were okay with the idea. And the others were like, what? Are you going to ask us for money for listening to stories? And I said, yes, because it's a curriculum that I'm going to develop around stories and, the immense benefits of stories. And of course, I was sort of an enthusiastic, sort of budding entrepreneur, and I wanted to sell my idea to them. So I had this list of benefits of stories. But it was hard, Usha, very hard. It was difficult to convince people to enroll their children in a class where learning will happen by way of stories. But I did not give up. I kept going with those 4 who had signed up. And within, I think, 3 or 4 months, those 4 had gone up to 10. And then those 10 went up to 40. And then there was no end to it. And pretty soon I had to look for a space to do this. And so my husband was also switching careers because, he was, as I told you, a filmmaker earlier. So he was setting up his small office. And in the morning hours, he would have his team there in the office. In the evening, we would push them into one tiny cubicle and have that outside space for the class. So that's how NutSpace started. We started our classes from there, where it was just me telling stories to, a broader vision where stories are much more than just that and there. Stories can actually be used to build life skills in children. And this is something that, a thought that developed with the classes that we were doing, but also with my own kids, like, so my son who's 10 now, and we have a daughter as well who's 3. And we've seen the magic of stories with them. And we wanted to take this to more children. So we developed a curriculum, which was a story-based curriculum. We started working with schools, doing teacher training workshops. And we built our platform where we started creating self-paced, story-based courses where, one can just plug and play this in their classrooms and watch the magic of stories. So, this is pretty much it at the moment. And as we speak, we constantly strive, to make this bigger, and we're working very hard every day.
Yes, Rohini, I completely vouch because I have personally been there, part of your storytelling festival in Lucknow as well as in Varanasi. Rohini not only runs successfully her company NutSpace, but she also curates storytelling festivals, bespoke. And I've been part of 2 of her such wonderful festivals. So, Rohini, we'll talk about a little more about NutSpace and the storytelling festivals and how is the scene in a small town like Kanpur? Of course, with a thriving industry, leather industry, and others such. Maybe I'm ignorant of many more. But who has been your inspiration in this journey?
So, Usha, when I was growing up, I watched my mother, and I want to really take you back into those childhood years where my mom, who's also an educator, and so I remember that we were, as kids, it was her dream to open up her own school. And she would always say that, one day I'll have my own preschool. And she wanted to work with young children only. That's what she would always say, that one day I'll have my own school. And she was so busy sort of bringing us up, but she didn't give up on that dream. And I saw her sort of nurture that thought and work towards a full-fledged dream. I think I was 18 when she opened up her own preschool. And she completed her bachelor's in education after she had all of us kids. So I've seen her working hard, studying into the night with those thick books. And I think Maybe because I was at that age where I was really, observing her, and that spirit of hers, that undying love for your own dreams and working towards, those dreams. That sort of brushed onto me, I suppose, because I saw her doing that, working towards it, and yet balancing her life so well with her in-laws, with us children. At no point did we feel that, we are missing out on our mom. She was always there for us as a friend, as a listener, as a keen listener always. And at the same time, she was always there for the family as well. And yet she managed to open up her school. It was a very small initiative when she started. It was a preschool, and she called it the Orchid Prep School because she loves gardening and her love for flowers is undying. And so she wanted to name it after her favorite flower, orchid. And I saw Orchid Prep School growing in Shimla. And from our house, there was this floor on our house where she started the preschool. And at one point, I found myself teaching in that preschool. Whenever I would have these breaks from school, I would go there and start teaching. And that was probably my first exposure to kids. And probably that is why it comes naturally to me, because it was somewhere in my system from that early, an age. And then at one point, I remember there was the school for children with special needs that was closing down. It was in our neighborhood because they ran out of funds. And these two teachers, they were not even the owners of that school. The two teachers, they came over to my mother and said, if there's anybody in Shimla who can help us, it's you. So we have our children with special needs and they need a place to go. The funding has stopped. Can you please accommodate us? And my mother, without even batting an eyelid, without even thinking of all the administrative work it would involve or whatever it is, she just welcomed these kids into that little space that she had. And after a little while, there was another lot. They said, we have children who are not from a very privileged backgrounds and they cannot pay fees for really big schools. So can you open a school with, for children with where the fee is very nominal? And again, in that same space, she accommodated those children as well. So I think I have seen her journey as an educator very closely, but not just an educator. I've seen her journey as a woman who doesn't give up on her dreams, and as a woman who is very welcoming, very open. And she's my biggest inspiration. And when I talk to her about where do you get this energy from? How do you do this? She says, I get it from my mom. So my nani, is also very inspiring, and her story is also very inspiring. She lost her husband when she was in her 30s, and the way she handled her life back in that time, she found a purpose, which was, she wanted to come close to her spirituality. And she was a lone traveler. She would travel around the country seeking that spirituality and that sense of purpose of her life. It was really, really inspiring to watch these two women in my life. And I guess that's where I get that strength from. So these two women in my growing up years, and after I got married, when I moved here to Kanpur, I was surrounded by more inspiring women, and one more in my own house is my mother-in-law, who's an entrepreneur. She is a baker, a home baker. And I have seen her, so passionately working into the night, doing her cakes, crafting her cakes. Each cake is an art masterpiece. The pain that she puts into each cake, that personal attention that she gives into each cake that she prepares, I guess somewhere I sort of absorbed that passion and love for work from her. So I was this greedy girl, looking at all these inspiring women around me and soaking in whatever I could from them. And I think I'm blessed because of all these wonderful women that I'm surrounded with.
Thank you, Rohini. Yes, our women are resilient, strong, and they persisted with their dreams, right? So we need to persevere, persist, and our dreams will come true. Rohini, I know you're yourself a very strong woman, and I've seen you, like I told my viewers and listeners, that I've seen you evolve, grow, and somebody whom I have admired from a distance, you know, uh, observing, watching, and seeing all your different achievements and milestones over the years. I know you are an author. You have published a book, an anthology as well, and self published your book. Before we move on to that, can we listen to a story on the theme of breaking the bias?
Sure, definitely, Usha. For today, I decided to, present a story that I've written myself. So I call the story "Sky's the Limit." When Shalu was born, her father cried. Her mother did not even get time to recover from childbirth, and she had to get back to work. Her parents worked in a bird sanctuary, taking care of birds, feeding them, cleaning. It was a lot of hard work, and the money was not enough for the ever growing family, Shalu now, and her two elder sisters. Somehow, Shalu's father had this idea that if they had a son, all their troubles will be over. Shalu's sisters looked after her as they worked in the house, fed her, played with her. And pretty soon, Shalu too started spending a lot of time at the bird sanctuary. She must have been 5 or 6, maybe, when one day she looked up at the sky for a very long time, listening to the chatter of the birds. And then she looked at her mom, who was busy, and she said, "I love the stories that the birds exchange." Her mother was a little confused, but she looked at her daughter, and Shalu continued, The birds, they talk about these distant lands that they visit. Some have traveled thousands and thousands of kilometers to be here. Some talk about a new fruit that they tasted. Some talk about a new home that they wish to build. Some talk about their babies, and some talk about their parents. Oh, I love listening to their stories. Shalu's mother was a little amused, but just then, her father, who happened to be hearing and listening to them, came in and shouted at her, "What is this nonsense that you're encouraging? Birds can't talk. I don't want you to live in this imaginary world. Birds can't talk." Saying that, he walked away angrily from there. That little girl, Shalu, had tears in her eyes, and she looked at her mother and said, "But Mama, I promise they can." Shalu's mother simply smiled and brushed a tear from her cheek. That year, the family saw happiness for the first time. Or so it seemed. They were blessed with a baby boy. Shalu probably saw her father laughing for the first time. But then, things became a little hard. Her sisters had to get married, and that left a deep hole in the family's savings and finances. Shalu was expected to work harder. At times, she would get really angry with her little brother because he got some privileges that she didn't. He got to go to school, and that really annoyed Shalu. She would look at him and she would just clench her fists and almost want to hurt him, but then she couldn't because he loved her so much. Every time he would look at his sister, he would put his tiny arms around her, hug her, and kiss her. Shalu's emotions were conflicting. How could she be angry with this little boy who loves her so much? So she struck a deal with her brother. He would go to school, learn how to read over there, come back home, and teach her. And that's how it went. Although somehow she got really annoyed at times with him because he just wouldn't pay enough attention. How she wished she would go to school instead and learn. How greedy she would be to lap up all that information. But then this is how it was. Time went by. Shalu grew up. She was now 15. And the workload was taking a toll on the family. Her mother had to pick up multiple jobs. Apart from the work that she did at the sanctuary, she had to work as a domestic helper in 3 more homes. And all that workload took a toll on her health, and soon she took ill. And now it was Shalu's turn to step into her mother's shoes. Ma, I don't want to work in those homes. I'll work harder and harder at the sanctuary, but don't send me to those homes, she begged and she cried. You have to go and work there, her father said, or else we're getting you married. Shalu had tears in her eyes again. And again she felt helpless because for her brother, life hadn't changed. He continued going to school, even though he wasn't interested. He continued getting 2 rotis for dinner, even though Shalu had to only eat half. It was a different thing that he saved one of his rotis for her and they shared it later together at night. But things were unfair. Shalu started going to those 3 homes and working. And when her mother got a little better, they expected her to continue working there. She was younger, she was fitter, she could get more work done, she could bring more money to the house. One day she looked at her mother and she said, Ma, I want to fly. You know, the birds, they've been asking me since many, many, many years to go with them. But Mama, I was scared. I didn't want to go with them. Where could they be going? Those unknown lands. I was scared. But then the birds assured me. They said that the sun looks after them. The wind carries them. Ma, I want to fly with them. And tomorrow they're leaving for a long journey. I'm going. Shalu's mother looked at her. Her eyes were tired and puffy. Her face was pale, thin, and wrinkled. And yet, she had a glint of hope in her eyes. She looked at her daughter. There was no expression there. But Shalu got her answer. At night, she hugged her brother really tight. She kissed him. And then before the sun came out, she left quietly. Just before leaving, she went to her mother's bedside and gently stroked her cheek. Her mother felt her daughter's gentle stroke, but she didn't open her eyes. She didn't want her daughter to be weak. When the sun rose that morning, Shalu's mother stepped out, and as the first ray of the sun pierced her eye, she fought it and she looked up at the sky. And there, up in the sky, she caught a flock of birds flying. She looked up and she blew a kiss and she said, "Fly high, my little one. Fly free. The sky is the limit." Thank you. I can't hear you, Usha. You're on mute. Sorry.
What a lovely, inspiring story, Rohini. You know, you painted such a visual picture of Shalu, her brother, and the birds. You know, I was transported to half to Thumbelina, you know, how the birds come and tell her story and her mother listens to it in the garden, you know, the birds whispering and talking and knows that her daughter is finally safe. Beautiful. You know that a storyteller transports the listener on the wings of her words, and you on literally on the wings of your story, we flew to this beautiful land, to this beautiful little hamlet, and Shalu, her mother, and her brother. Beautiful. So this is your self-published, your first authored story.
Actually, I wrote this story especially for today's interview, Usha. This
Oh,
hasn't
oh,
been published yet.
oh, wonderful. So the title of the story is Sky is the Limit.
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. Oh, I'm so honored. So for all the listeners and the viewers, this story has just premiered or it's been on Storytellers Cafe, and what a special bonanza. Thank you, Rohini. This is wonderful. What a great, great honor
Thank you.
to have this story presented on our platform.
Thank
Indeed, a wonderful, wonderful gesture from you. But you have also written a book, and then you got that. Then you have other publishers who have then started queuing up to get your book. So, can you tell us a little bit about those books and
Sure,
stories?
sure, absolutely. So this is the first book I wrote, Usha. It's called The Silver Lining, and I self-published this in 2014. That's when this came out, The Silver Lining. And so this is a picture book for children, and it sort of talks about cloud formation. I mean, there's a STEAM learning there, but also it has, obviously more layers, and it's a story about friendship and hope and being there for your friends. So this is that story. Um, a few years ago, I think 3 or 4 years ago, I was approached by Ford India, the automobile company, and I wrote this book for them. It's called Discover More with Ford, and this is a book about raising awareness on safety within the car and on the road, especially written for children, answering a lot of their questions about why seat belts, why can't one sit in the front seat before they turn 13, and a couple of interesting things, and also courtesy on the road. And Ford has coined a lovely term called courtesy, so which is basically being courteous to people on the road while you're driving. So there are beautiful lessons in the story for children who are going to be the drivers of tomorrow, and how they can show courtesy to others on the road, not just follow the traffic rules, but also, the person who's walking on the road has the first right to the road, acknowledging that. So this is that story, Discover More with Ford. This is a book that I've authored for them. And I've contributed to a couple of anthologies as an author. One that was released most recently is called When Mommy Was a Little Girl. It's been published by Ponytail Books. And 15 mommies, 15 authors have contributed, sharing their childhood stories about what they did when they were little girls. And there's one story that I've authored here, and it's called How Mommy Prepared a Cup of Tea. So that's a story about something really mischievous that I did when I was 9 years old. And so, yeah, these are my stories that I've published. And I write a lot of stories, Usha. A lot of them are not published also, but a lot of content that I create for NutSpace is original stories, based on original stories. So, yes, I love
That's
writing.
great. Yes, it's evident. Rohini, where can the viewers and the listeners purchase your books? Where can they go?
So Discover More with Ford is a free of cost book. It's available as a PDF, and one can just search Discover More with Ford by Rohini Vij. They'll find the PDF. They can download it. There's a read aloud video as well on Ford's platform. So that's something that, if you have children, you must, watch that and listen to it and read it to your children. So that's available for free. The Silver Lining is available on Amazon. So please search. And so is When Mommy Was a Little Girl, also available on Amazon and all bookstores, leading bookstores, independent bookstores. You'll find these books. So thank you. Please go ahead and give these books a try.
Thank you. So, listeners, what are you waiting for? Please go. You can definitely Google Rohini Vij, and Amazon.in will have her books, her two books, and then also the independent bookshops and others. And it's wonderful. I can personally vouch for the book brought out by Ford on road safety, because I've gone through it, and it's a beautiful book teaching children about road safety. I remember years back working on road safety. There's a beautiful garden in town, in the city of Mumbai, Cooperage, which has all the traffic signals and everything, where children are taken there for a visit, and which teaches them all about the how to be courteous on the road, how to cross, what is signal, and everything. It's a beautiful place where usually the pre-primary kids would
Wow.
go. So when I saw your book, I was reminded of that time. at the Cooperage grounds, taking children and teaching them about road safety. So please go ahead and get your copies. And we would also like to hear from you. Please drop in your comments. Since this is a recorded session and we are not live, but I invite you on Sunday, the 13th of March, to drop in your comments and questions, because I'm sure Rohini will also be there present and we can answer your questions on the chat box. We would love to hear from you. And as you know, that this segment of or this podcast will be archived on Bharat FM's Facebook page as well as on the YouTube channel. So you can go anytime and watch this podcast and refer it to your friends. So, Rohini, welcome back to Storytellers Cafe. And what a great honor that you just published or read out your special curated story for Break the Bias. Sky is the limit. Thank you. If you haven't heard it, please go back and listen to the recording again. Rohini, can you tell us about your company, NutSpace?
Yes. So, Usha, as I just mentioned even in the beginning, of the show, that NutSpace is working with children, teachers, and the idea is to create story-based content to build life skills in children. So that's essentially what NutSpace is doing now, with a vision to raise readers, where we believe that introducing children to books, stories from an early age will encourage them to, have and nurture a love for books and reading. We have sessions for babies at our center, where we encourage parents to bring in their babies, and we have music based and story based sessions for very young children. And then as they progress, we have an offering for toddlers, and then 6-year olds, and then it goes all the way up to 12 at the center level. We also have online sessions, again, for 4 to 12-year-olds, where we are working with stories and building life skills. And we have pre-recorded or self-paced sessions that are available on our learning management system. You can go to our website, nutspace.in, and you'll find all the information over there. But NutSpace also, in a very big way, works with teachers and schools. We create curriculum which is story-based. We encourage teachers to use storytelling as a pedagogy, where we equip them with the right training and the content to run in their classroom. NutSpace is also associated with a few state governments, where with the government of Himachal Pradesh, we had worked with Anganwadi schools in equipping their teachers with phonics, because now early years is an age which is really really it needs the focus, and rightly so. So the government is working towards that, and we helped equip their children with the knowledge of phonics, and even got them books and resources. So similarly, we worked here as well in Uttar Pradesh. We received a little funding from USAID as part of our reading program. We were part of this initiative called Read Alliance, which was funded by USAID, and our book exploration reading program received a funding, where we incorporated that into 12 government schools here in Uttar Pradesh. And the findings were amazing, and we work with a lot of schools there. We also work with corporates. So I'm engaged with a few corporates, HP to name one, where I am an expert on their platform called Print Learn Center, where we help develop worksheet and video based content for, again, very young, not very young children, but say 3 to 12-year-olds. So essentially, NutSpace is a content creator, and that's what we do. But we also believe in physical classes, empowering teachers, empowering parents. So this is what we are doing, and constantly evolving and growing with all the people that we meet every day.
Wonderful. What an achievement. What an achievement in one so young. I know you just celebrated your birthday, and I'm not going to disclose your age. Rohini, wishing you a very happy birthday and wishing you more success, more power.
Thank you.
Because, I feel when your intent is right and you work hard, and nothing, no energy in the universe can stop you. In fact, they all will, work for you to reach your success. And that's my very strong belief in life. Rohini, I know that I know we've kind of covered all ground. If we have left anything, you can tell me. I was personally curious about your curating festivals, storytelling festivals, not a literature festival, because I guess you did have some authors, if I'm not mistaken, but just correct me, I think more and more there were storytellers, because there is a clear demarcation between a literature festival and a storytelling festival. Especially in India, a literature festival is where authors, publishers, illustrators, distributors are all invited, as well as storytellers are thrown in. But a storytelling festival is primarily the oral tradition, telling stories, and workshops based around that. So, can you tell us about your festival?
Yes. So I remember in 2016, we decided to, it was a very small thought at that point. That's how it really started, actually. In 2016, we wanted to bring, in the summer months, we wanted to bring a few storytellers, authors to Kanpur, because we realized, and in my interaction with schools here and, children here, I realized that there was a lot available in the metropolitan cities, and the children here did not really have that kind of exposure. So we decided to do it very, small, at a very small scale, at our own center, and we invited 2 or 3 people. The response was overwhelming, and parents wanted more. So this was just a little experiment. Then we wanted to take it on a larger scale, and we coined the name of the festival. We called it Book Nuts, because books and stories, and bringing the nutty bit from NutSpace. So Book Nuts was the name of our festival. And here in Kanpur, I've worked very closely, and I still do, with a lot of schools, and I'm really, really grateful to them for really encouraging me and giving me a platform, and seeing, the benefits of storytelling, and opening their arms to, NutSpace. So we requested a school if they would come together with us as a venue partner, and they happily agreed. And we invited, yes, storytellers and authors. So it was a mix, and it was phenomenal. The response was amazing, and parents came to us, teachers came to us, saying, you've got to do this over and over again, because the kind of exposure that our children have got is something that we don't want to, you've given us a taste of something, and we don't want to let this go. So in Varanasi also, we have somebody running NutSpace as a franchisee. And when she saw that here in Kanpur, she said, please take it to Varanasi as well, because the schools here are equally starved of literary faces, storytellers, and please bring that exposure here as well. So we took Book Nuts to Varanasi as well, and twice. It was again, amazing. The response was great. The school, again, we tied up with the school as a partner, and it was open to public too, in both the cases, the school kids as well as public. So that model worked really well. And I think we were so fortunate, because we didn't have to, because we didn't have funds, Usha. We were a startup. So, it was difficult. It was just a dream, and, we didn't even raise any funds. But I think the universe just opens up avenues, and everybody, I mean, we invited you, and you were gracious to come over on an honorarium, and I think that everybody who agreed you to be a part of this festival contributed. And that's, I think, what made it possible. And we did this with more schools in Kanpur, and we started taking it as a then, at a bigger scale and at a smaller scale, just individually for schools as well, curating it only for the school at a smaller level. So did this a couple of times until the pandemic struck. And even before that, there was a little disturbance. One of our festivals sadly had to be scrapped. It was the next day at Banaras. And it was the day where suddenly, everything came to a standstill, because there was the CAA disturbance and all of that was happening, and the Allahabad ruling had to come, and Section 144 was imposed, and we had to just scrap the festival where everybody was there. So it was a huge loss as well. And it happened twice, once in Varanasi and once in Kanpur. So we've suffered huge losses as well. And then, of course, the pandemic struck. But we do wish to bring it back again now that things are coming back to normal. And yes, so that's the festival. And the idea is to take exposure to tier 2, tier 3 cities to children who don't really get that exposure. We want them to meet storytellers, listen to stories, meet authors, touch books, and come close to that world. So that's Book Nuts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I wish you all the best, Rohini. It's been wonderful talking to you and traversing the journey of Book Nuts, NutSpace, as well as your own personal journey. It's wonderful. Like it's a story, right? It was unfolding right there before our eyes. So, Rohini, on the occasion of Women's Day, International Women's Day 2022, with the theme is break the bias, and you've shared a wonderful story with us. Uh, what can you leave the listeners with? Is there any last thoughts, something that you would like to share and leave it with our listeners?
So, first of all, thank you for giving me the platform, because it's really an honor to be here, and for all the appreciation and lovely words of encouragement, not just here and otherwise as well. Usha, you're constantly, giving me and helping me sort of grow, and that's really, really encouraging. And that's a sort of keeps us going. All that appreciation and encouragement. Um, Having said that, I mean, there's one thought that I thought I'll address earlier, and it got left. Was in a city here like Kanpur. Again, like my husband is very closely involved with me in this venture, and he's used his experience as a filmmaker, and we've set up a team together. But we're equal partners in this, right? And a lot of times, when sort of closing a deal, maybe when we work with corporates or anything, I face this at times where somebody would say, okay, so for the finances, we'll talk to Mukul. And, so I'm a little taken aback at times, because, fortunately for me, I've never felt that, resistance from my partner. And we have equal partners, and that's how it is. But others always assume that, okay, I'm handling maybe the softer part of it, the money bit, the harder, real talk will be done, the deal will be closed or sealed once the husband comes in. And that is something that I faced. But just wanted to also bring that up, because since we're talking about breaking the bias, and so a lot of times I found it, initially I would just not say anything, but now I've started saying, what, I can do this. I'm perfectly capable of sealing the deal, and we don't need him right now. We can handle this. So well, I just wanted to end this conversation on this note, that while we as women, yes, definitely need all the support possible of our families, of our partners, and the entire ecosystem, but I think till the time we don't have our own support, I don't think we can do it. So somewhere we have to stop relying on that support. So that's just that one thought that I'd like to leave everybody with.
Very well said, Rohini. It reminds me, I'm a singer, but I'm not going to sing here. But it's beautifully, Bekhof Azad hai Jeena mujhe, Bekhof Azad hai Rehna mujhe. When I sing, it comes. So, Diware unchi hai, Galiyan hai tang. We have so many impediments in our path. But I think women have that grit, determination, never die attitude, resilient, and that's why you're here as as somebody who can inspire all the listeners and the viewers that we can do it. If she can do it, why can't? When I listen to your varied achievements, I wonder, what have I done in life? And then I think about, all I wanted was to raise my kids well, send them to the best schools and colleges and do something of my own, which I discovered was telling stories. And that's it. And to just exist. Somebody sent me a beautiful forward today where this young woman is told how she should and how she should be. Finally, she runs to the forest. She sees the elm tree, the fir, the juniper, all the trees, and she sits and listens to the forest sounds. And she says that the forest just let her be. So I think it's important for us to just be who we
Yes,
are, not
absolutely.
to change ourselves. So I think with these wonderful thoughts and views and what you've expressed, uh, that why do you need Mukul Khattar for that, uh, you know, interview? I mean, I can deal that. And one only shows by actions. So it's time for women to take actions. And as storytellers, we are very, very non invasive. Through our stories, it's a very powerful medium to cut across all the gender bias and straight reach, what we need to reach, right?
Yes.
So, more power to you, Rohini, and thank you for being my guest tonight. And for all our friends and listeners of Storytellers Cafe, please stay tuned and do drop in your comments. You can do a live chat with Rohini on the 13th evening on Facebook as well as on YouTube. And I'll see you next week, same time, same place, with yet another women achiever, a storyteller from across the seven seas and maybe seven oceans from Seattle, United States. So thank you, Rohini, and good night to everybody.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. Good night and namaste.
Thank you.
This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.